Happy belated President's Day to all our listeners in the United States. Whether you spent the long weekend traveling, catching up on rest, or simply enjoying a break from the news cycle, we're glad you're here. Welcome to Evolvent, the probability brief, your twice-weekly signal check on the world's most telling prediction markets. I'm your host, and today is Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. As always, this show stands on its own, but when a major early indicators theme overlaps with a major market movement, we'll acknowledge the shared terrain without blending the editorial missions of the two programs. In today's episode, we're examining a presidential primary market that has shifted sharply in the past 72 hours, a whale move in the digital currency compliance space, and a mispriced market involving a major infrastructure security mandate that traders may be overlooking. Each of these markets tells a different story about how sentiment, incentives, and attention shape probability landscapes. And as always, our goal is to help you understand not just what moved, but why it moved, and what the movement might signal for the weeks ahead. We begin with the 2026 U.S. presidential election market, which has been unusually active since the holiday weekend. As of this morning, the probability for the incumbent administration's party to retain the White House has climbed from 56% to 62%. This shift did not come from a single headline or a viral moment. Instead, it appears to be driven by a combination of polling stability, a well-received policy rollout on small business tax credits, and a series of endorsements from regional leaders who carry influence within their respective constituencies. What makes this movement notable is the timing. Holiday weekends often suppress trading volume, but this time the opposite occurred. Liquidity increased, and traders repositioned aggressively, suggesting that the market was waiting for a catalyst to confirm a trend that had been building quietly for several weeks. At the same time, the leading opposition candidate's probability has dipped only slightly, from 40% to 36%. This indicates that traders still see a competitive race, but they are adjusting expectations around organizational strength and campaign coherence. One factor contributing to the shift is the release of new fundraising disclosures showing that the incumbent-aligned political committees significantly outpaced their rivals in January. Fundraising data is often a lagging indicator, but in prediction markets it can serve as a proxy for campaign infrastructure, volunteer mobilization, and message discipline. Traders appear to be interpreting the numbers as evidence that the incumbent party has built a more stable operational foundation heading into the spring. Another detail worth noting is the increase in implied volatility within the election market. Implied volatility, in this context, refers to the degree of expected fluctuation in the probability over a given period. When implied volatility rises, it signals that traders anticipate sharper swings ahead. This often happens when multiple variables, such as economic data, legal developments, or geopolitical events, are expected to converge. For listeners who follow early indicators, this dynamic echoes a theme from last month's episode on political coalition behavior. When institutional actors begin to align, markets often anticipate countermoves, narrative shifts, or unexpected events that could rebalance the field. Now let's turn to our Whale Watch segment, where a major move in the digital currency compliance space caught traders off guard late Sunday night. A single wallet placed $625,000 into the national stablecoin compliance framework passed by Q3 market. Before the trade, the yes side sat at 24%. After the trade, it jumped to 41%. This is a dramatic shift for a market that had been drifting sideways for weeks. What makes the move especially interesting is the context. Over the past month, several federal agencies have signaled interest in establishing clearer rules for stablecoin issuers, particularly around reserve transparency, redemption guarantees, and custodial risk. But until now, there was little indication that Congress was prepared to act. This wallet has a mixed but noteworthy track record. It correctly anticipated last year's digital asset tax reporting amendment, but it missed on a major cross-border payments bill. That inconsistency makes the move harder to interpret, but the size of the position alone is enough to draw attention. Traders have already begun to reposition, and liquidity in the market has nearly doubled since the trade. Whether the whale is early, informed, or simply making a high-conviction bet remains to be seen, but the market is clearly taking the signal seriously. One possible explanation is that the whale believes regulatory clarity around stablecoins is becoming politically advantageous, especially as digital asset adoption continues to grow among retail users and small businesses. Next, we move to the mispriced market of the week, and this one sits at the intersection of infrastructure security, public safety, and federal oversight. The market in question is National Grid cyber resilience mandate issued by year-end, currently priced at just 16%. That number seems low given the recent uptick in cyber intrusion attempts targeting regional power utilities. Over the past 2 weeks, 3 separate utilities have reported attempted breaches involving advanced persistent threat actors, a term used to describe highly sophisticated cyber adversaries, often linked to state-sponsored groups. While none of the attempts resulted in operational disruptions, they have generated significant concern among cybersecurity analysts and federal officials. What makes this market particularly intriguing is the political context. Several members of Congress have already signaled interest in establishing minimum cyber resilience standards for critical infrastructure, including requirements for multi-factor authentication, network segmentation, and real-time anomaly detection. Additionally, the Department of Energy recently released a technical advisory highlighting vulnerabilities in legacy grid management systems. Despite these signals, the market remains skeptical, likely because federal action on infrastructure security often moves slowly and requires coordination across multiple agencies. But the combination of public pressure, expert warnings, and early legislative groundwork suggests that the probability may be undervalued. If even a preliminary mandate or guidance document is issued, the market would resolve yes. For traders who follow regulatory momentum, this is one to watch closely. Before we close, it's worth noting a smaller but meaningful shift in the major weather disaster relief package passed by Q3 market. The probability has risen from 31% to 37% following a series of severe winter storms across the Midwest and Northeast. While this market isn't our main focus today, it's a reminder that environmental volatility continues to shape legislative priorities. Early indicators listeners may recall last week's episode on climate-driven infrastructure stress, and here we see a real-time example of how those structural pressures translate into market expectations. To recap today's briefing, the presidential election market is responding to a combination of polling stability, fundraising momentum, and coordinated endorsements. A whale has made a bold move in the stablecoin compliance market, signaling potential legislative progress. The cyber resilience mandate market appears undervalued given recent intrusion attempts and political interest. And environmental volatility is nudging disaster relief expectations upward. Across all of these markets, the common thread is that traders are responding to clusters of signals rather than isolated headlines. That pattern is becoming more pronounced as we move deeper into the election year. Thank you for listening to Evolvent, the probability brief. If you found today's episode insightful, please like, subscribe, follow, and share. Your support helps this show reach more listeners who care about how the world's most important events are being priced in real time. You can also listen to the probability brief on Spotify and YouTube, alongside Early Indicators Brief, which continues to explore the deeper structural forces shaping global systems. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, or betting advice. Market probabilities change rapidly, and listeners should conduct their own research before making decisions.